Hello, founders and investors. Welcome back to Next Round Ready. I'm your host, Chris. Today we have very special guest, Lolita Taub. Lolita, welcome to the show. We get to talk about this book. I'm excited.
Oh, thank you, Chris. I am very excited to be on the podcast and speaking with you and hearing about all the great work you're doing too. So let's dig in.
Yeah, I'm trying to catch up to you, right? That's the So you're one of those people that's been around the entire startup ecosystem. Which part of you like the most?
Honestly, I like all of it, and it's likely because of the ADHD in me. Um, I mean, I had Eric Vaughn from Hustle Fund once ask me, "How have you managed to, jump in, coming from very humble backgrounds, and do all these things?" Because usually fear is something that stops you. And I didn't have a good answer for years, and then I realized it's ADHD. And I love every piece for different reasons. I like being a founder because I get to operate, right? Like it's really fun to put things together and see them come
Yes.
to life and solve problems. I like to be an angel because I don't have to put on the rigorous like due diligence hat. Or I can have a different thesis or whatnot, as opposed to when I put on my GP and venture capital hat, where there's a thesis and there's specific criteria. And then as an LP, it's similar to the GP, right? Like, but it's interesting because now you're looking at who from the venture capital funds that are raising you want to invest in so that you get a share of their diversified portfolio. And then the final one, right, being an ecosystem builder, I really enjoy that because it's getting to the people, right? Like one of my favorite activities to do in the community is anytime I go speak or go to a conference or anything like that, always try to have like a coffee, an informal
Hmm.
coffee where founders, funders, and just friends, really, the ecosystem builders come together. And that's really like part of the reason why I even wrote the book, right? What actually matters, startups, capital, and the rules nobody taught us, because it takes the whole village. And I think understanding every different role is also really important. And also, Chris, I'm sure you've noticed this, but so many in the ecosystem wear all the different hats, whether at the beginning or through their journey, or they get curious. And it's just a cycle that gets fed, right, in a community sport. And I love different parts of it for different reasons. It's just awesome.
Yeah, I'm with you on that because in my now 2.5 years kind of time frame, I've gone through a lot of different phases as you've talked about, and I'm in
Hmm.
that really community builder space now, and it's fun. I tell people all the time, it's genuinely fun, and being able to get on a podcast and go to the events and talk to people all the time. It's like every day I get to meet some new amazing person who's working on something that's just out of this world. Like that part,
Yeah.
it's fun.
And
It's
if
unpredictable.
you're a nerd, it's like the best because you're like, "Oh, what rabbit hole will I go down today?" And then you get to meet these people that are giving their lives and souls, right? Because this whole industry requires tears, blood, and sweat, right? And so it's just amazing to also connect just on a human level with people who are a little crazy, a little out there, like us.
Right. Right. Before I got into venture, I always thought I was trying to find my place throughout my career. Like I've worked all kind of jobs, like from construction, I worked for the trash company. I've done all kind of crazy jobs. I can say that working in venture is a place where I most feel like home, so to speak. Like
Yeah.
it just feels natural to do all the things I'm doing. And I think that's how a lot of founders feel about their startups. So I'm excited to
Hmm.
talk about this book. So how did you come up with this title, What Actually Matters? Because that's like very just straight to the point.
I think that's the point, right? So one thing that when I look at all the books, and I've read all of them, and they're in the resource database that will accompany the book, actually. whether it's Angel by Jason Calacanis, or It's About Damn Time by Arlen Hamilton, or How to Fund Your VC or How to Raise Your Fund, like all these different books across the spectrum. I've seen them all. I've done like the Venture Deals. Oh, Venture Deals is really great. And their courses, and just gone through everything, right? Because I came from nothing, so I had to start from scratch and build with and in community. And so being able to navigate that, a lot of the time, the topics, the language, like it wasn't accessible. And I was sometimes at the beginning, especially, I was like, I don't know if I really know what this is, but I'm just going to pretend like I do. So I feel like I fit in. And then, I was just like, when I understand something, I'm going to share it. And I love learning and sharing what I learn. So, and over time, I've written posts and I would, all these things. And the one thing people always say is, I love how you make everything so accessible. You just make it like straight to the point. It's easy to understand and it's human. And so I've taken that over the years and I'm like, you know what? This is why we need whatever. I don't see another book that's out there that's like, here's the map, here's how to navigate it so that you can start at a place where you're not, paying this access tax to the level that I've had to pay it. And access tax being like, the time it takes you to the learning curve, whether it's in the actual business, people, like in between the lines, the emotional roller coaster of feeling like you're not there or you don't fit in or, whatever. And then the equity part, because oftentimes when you're first starting out, you don't know, like, how much are we giving off? Like, what is even equity, right? And so being able to share these concepts that have, like, there's tons of books that cover all the topics, right? But what I sought to do was to create a book that encapsulates how to think about the system, how to navigate this, how to think about it. So when you're making decisions, you can figure out from a place of like comfort and not like, am I like, is this how it works? I don't know. And who do I ask? And also knowing the stuff that you don't even know how to ask, right? So every chapter starts with real questions from the 5 different seats, right? So founders, angels, GPs, LPs, ecosystem builders. It has also like a TLDR section for sure, for those of you who are like, I don't want to read the whole thing. But I and it's made so that you could take a chapter, however, wherever you're at, and come back to it, no matter what hat you're wearing. And I also integrated, because I know everyone's using LLMs, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whatever you're using, right? So I actually made sure that every single chapter has an actionable prompt that you can customize based on your role to take action on the learnings of the chapter, if you will.
I love that. That is so unique. And I think necessary for books today, because we're at the point now where people can sit and read the book. But I'm one of those people that some books I read, like if I'm reading philosophers, I'm reading it. And like some books need to be studied. There's like a difference. Like some you can just read through. Oh, I read this. Other books you need to study. It means you need to read it 3 times. But having the prompts in there, oh, that is incredible. That I love that.
Yeah,
That's such a
because
nice.
then you can skim through it, and like I'm making this like ADHD friendly, right? Because this is how my brain works. I'm like connecting all the dots, and I'm like, but if you were to just read a chunk, you're gonna get value. Like that's my goal. That you're gonna get value. That it's gonna make your life easier. That you're not gonna have to make the mistakes or lack the knowledge that I lacked when I first started, with like not even understanding what venture capital was.
Wow. Okay. Okay. I love this. Let's get a little more practical now. So,
Yeah.
what are investors actually looking for at that pre-seed stage? Because a lot of my founders that listen maybe are idea, MVP, early stage. Some have went and vibe coded something and they have a few customers. Some are spending their time right now talking to a ton of customers. So what does that look like?
I mean, I think that if you ask this question to 100 VCs, you will get 100 different answers, but they will have an underlying trend, right? Like when it's so early, you're betting on the founder, you're investing in the founder and your belief that they can make and build a company that will at some point reach 100 million in annual recurring revenue, right? So ultimately, investors will say the founder is number one. But I think that when you dig in, you're also looking at and thinking about, and I like to kind of, again, reframe it, right? So if you're a founder, I think it's so important to understand that as investors, we get thousands. So for example, I might see 7,000 startup deals or pitch decks a year. And so it's not just about like, what are the elements? So the question of like, what do I need to achieve? What's the checkbox is I can share that, right? You have like, what's the problem? What's the market size? Why are you differentiated? Why is it your team? Like, why is this the time? You know, all those things. But what I think that founders need to think about is it's also like we need to consider that investors, we're looking at all these deals and we're saying which one is going to be, which ones, right? A handful of them are going to be the ones that return the fund. And that's if you have an early stage, fund like mine, a micro fund, because we can actually, if we make one bet out of the portfolio, it can return it and it can create these really huge returns that maybe, what venture capital funds that are super massive and are like $1 billion in AUM are not really venture capital. So they have to look at different things, right? So for us at Ghana's, where we're investing in pre-seed and seed community-driven companies in the US and LATAM, by the way, we're looking for all of those foundational things we talked about, but we're also looking and we're really transparent. Hey, we're looking across the board too, like which ones are going to be the best ones to bet on. But on the community side, so here's the difference in how we look at startups is, do startups have a community differentiator? And I think community more than ever is so much more important in the world of AI, because it's literally the sticky thing that AI cannot replicate. So what does this mean for us? A community ROI. R is for revenue, O is for operations, I is for insight. So how is a company, a founder? It's more of a philosophy and an approach to how to build your company than anything else. And it is a go-to-market strategy. So how are you enabling a community that already exists, that you're going to solve a problem for? How are you getting them to give you insights to build your product? For operations, how are you getting these people that are in line with like your company to come and work for you, right? Like talent, recruiting, which is at the bulk of it, whether you're a really big team or less people now that AI is and LLMs are very helpful and agents, but you still need people. So you need to get not just the best people, the people that believe in what you're building. And then R is for revenue. I mean, it's just like we need to see the cash, right? Like what is the money, and how is this community and really just customer centric approach? How is that bringing in that revenue? And later on, it's how does it help you sell it, right? So you can think of different companies that are word of mouth, or they are so like PLG / like you just talk about it all the time. You're like, oh my God, you have to use Claude, right? And then there's also then after that, it's how to scale, right? Like how to sell and scale. And so how are we leveraging the power of community? Very much from a go-to-market strategy perspective. My background is I was in big tech sales, consulting, sales, and hardware software services at IBM, at Cisco. So very much grounded in that, but knowing that if you're a first-time founder, angel, GPLP, ecosystem builder, in order to build things, you have to build with your people. And if we didn't start with like this nepotistic community, that edge, quote unquote, then how do we do it? This is how. And now more than ever, like people want like human things, human connection, and they want to feel and be asked, what do you need? How do we solve it? And if you bring them along, then you build your company. And I'm sure, Chris, you're seeing this too. I mean, just our conversation prior to this conversation, you were just mentioning that, right? Like
Yeah.
the community, you ask it, you listen to it, you draw from it, and then you're able to solve problems and make it sustainable. Ask for money, right? In one way or another, you're solving a problem
It's
and you should get paid for it.
I think that's the process that every founder should sort of be using now. In my opinion, every founder should have at the very least a newsletter. The very least. As soon as you have an idea that you want to be a founder, start a newsletter. Write them talking about your ideas or whatever it is. That's like the foundation. And then the next step I tell founders is to make more content, whether you want to get on camera, if you want to start the podcast, just making content is a way to kind of, I look at it, it's like the world we live in now is everybody that makes content has their own auditorium. And like imagine the world is like a massive walkway where people can just walk through and they step into your auditorium, and then once they come in there, they're in your ecosystem and you can talk to them from the stage. So if you're a founder and you have that auditorium set up, it's great because now people come in and your room could be empty at first.
That's right.
But over time, it gets more and more crowded to where you go from the auditorium to a bigger stadium. Like that's the progress. But I try to tell founders to lean on that because you can't run from community now. You can't. If you're terrified of the camera, just write. Like, do whatever.
That's
but
right.
It's important
That's
that you put
right.
something out there.
I think 100%. And it does need to be authentic though, because as I always tell people, like you can have all of this and you can have, you know, quote unquote, the best solution, but like you can't just put it out there and they will come. You have to consistently deliver on the mission, vision, values that you're talking about so you get your people. The easiest way that I share with founders on how to think about community driven sales is think about an Apple products versus Android products and how, you know, one says something about you over the other. And so there's almost like a religion that comes together because it suits you. So, you know, if you're an Apple person or an Android person, it doesn't mean that you're bad either way or better, but there's something that it's like, okay, this is the kind of person that you are, or, you know, and people extrapolate that kind of thing. So when you do find your people and you're consistently sharing what you're about, for example, Apple, very sleek, polished, more sophisticated, you know, these kinds of things, minimalist, then the people who are part of that community by like an ethos perspective will come to you. And then when it comes to like the actual solution to the product, that then they're going to be like, of course, I'm going to go with, you know, whatever Chris is selling because I vibe with them and he gets the problem from the perspective that I need people to get, and I'm going to get my solution.
So let me ask you this, because this kind of goes to my next question. Should founders be building ecosystems before they raise, or not a whole entire ecosystem on Apple's level? But like the idea of building an ecosystem like that is very intriguing to me because it just seems like that's the easiest way to get that distribution, which we know is heavily tied to sales and growing a product, scaling, all of that good stuff. And like, even if your product sucks, if you have a community, they're going to tell you that it's terrible. Like,
right. Yeah. And that's
up.
part of the insight. Like that's actually the most valuable because if you go to your friends, they might like be really nice to you and be like, oh, Chris, everything you're doing is fantastic. And you want the real feedback. You want it from the people you're solving problems for. So to answer your question, I don't suggest that founders do one way or the other. I think we're all individuals and every single company can be a community driven company, or it cannot. And again, it's very much the methodology and the philosophy and how your mind works. Honestly, like if you're someone who's like antisocial and you're like, I'm just going to do like government contracts or, whatever. You still have to build a community, a network, but it's a little bit different. So, and then depending on whether it's B2B or B2C or, whatever your model may be, it might look a little different. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's about so much creating a community. And this is something that I think sometimes folks get wrong. There's already an existing community you're trying to solve a problem for. So it's creating that space for them to come together, for you to, exactly what you said, a distribution model, right? So if you're clear on what you're about, what you're solving for, you have that value, that differentiator, that should be like the magnet that brings more folks into your realm, but it's already within a community, right? So in figuring out how to enable it, because you could start from like, hey, I'm solving this very specific niche thing and let's build a community around that. But if you've done your homework, you know that there's this big a market, this is the TAM SAM SOM, and here's the markers, the trends of where this market is going and what the biggest problems are. And like you've gotten, I think, and what I'm driving at is the problem is the most important to focus on, in my opinion. And then once you are keen on like, this is the problem we're going to solve, and it's a big problem and big market, there's a lot of potential. If you're raising venture capital, that is, then it's okay. So where is this community? Where and how do you help create that space?
So,
and it could take different forms. It could be, like you said, newsletter. It could be a podcast. It could be literally like, old school, right? I when I was at IBM, Cisco, and even in startups, when I was working in startups, it was all about like, okay, how do we get like a group of people like on a call or whatever, and to figure out what do you need, what's working, what's not. Like it could be that old school. It could be WhatsApp. It could be Telegram. It could be, and there's no like, here's the thing to do and how to do it. It's just, who are the founders? Is this approach authentic to you? And how do you see it? It's kind of like an art and a science, because there's the community ROI formula that I shared with you, but it's also like, what works for you and what are you going to enjoy? Because people have a good BS meter and nobody wants slop, and feel like you're just like, I don't know, someone with $1 that, you can give it to me.
Yeah, what works for me with this community stuff is in person. I don't know. It's just something about getting out there and shaking hands, taking pictures and stuff. It does something for you, for me, energetically. And I think the impact you can make with somebody when you shake hands with them, it's nothing closer to that. Like going on calls and stuff works, but when you can get in person, I think that's the one thing I tell founders is to start going to events. Like,
yeah,
because if you meet an investor at an event, the connection you have with them is here compared to a LinkedIn message, which is like here. Like it just doesn't have the same weight because they shake hands with you. And I always do this a little corny thing too, where I will take a picture with them and then send it to them, and it works.
You're like, I have a picture of you. Let me send. I know you want it. It's like when I play with my fur baby and I show him something he wants, and I'm like, you want this, don't you? And that's how I get him to continue on his walk, or to get him to do to stop barking or something. But here's the thing: there's a lot of there's a lot of research that's made observations over like the trends of loneliness and all the after effects and PTSD that we got from COVID and everything, and people are wanting this in-person thing. But for a while it was kind of like all over the place, and it still is. I mean, it depends on your personality and where you draw your energy, because again, you have to be like authentic, in my opinion, be comfortable in your skin. So whatever works for you, I'd say do what works for you and then go from there, as opposed to do this exact thing. So if maybe it doesn't work for you, because for example, I love one-on-ones. I prefer one-on-ones. I prefer small event groups than huge ones. And I've
Yeah.
had, when I do these events, I sometimes, because they're open to anyone, sometimes there's literally a handful. And sometimes there's like 50, 60, 100. And the dynamic changes. And so for me, I prefer small because then we can get to people and talk about their specific thing and kind of start spitballing and really building a relationship and connecting. But again, that's why, you have to take everything into consideration, the variables. What is your business? Does it require this? Because for me, it's always think about lowest lift, highest impact, right? We have limited time, limited resources, limited emotional bandwidth, which is part of like the tax we pay, the access tax. So how do we reduce that tax and do the thing that our goal is, right? To build a successful business that makes money. So reverse engineer into that after you figure out, like, here's the problem I'm going to obsess over, because it's otherwise it could just, you start going every which direction. And, I talk about this in the book too. I talk about the ecosystem building, community building, and break it down, because at some point, if you get astray from like what is your actual goal, which this ecosystem, it could drag you to different angles, right?
Yeah.
You can start spending time on things that shouldn't be as priority as others. And if you have ADHD, you're neurodivergent like myself, you have to really keep these things like front and center. Like, what is my goal? How am I achieving it? Am I like steering away from that because, ooh, shiny object, let's do this talk, let's do this feature, let's do this event. And or just emotional burnout, and just physical burnout too. So lots of things to consider. So it's kind of like one of those answers consultants give. It depends, I hate that answer, but like it does depend. At the
I get
same
it though.
time.
I totally understand. So, what are some things that founders miss before they raise, and how do they fix it before their meeting? And this is an important question because I talk to a lot of founders who have never talked to investors before they're pitching, which I think is the worst. And that causes them to burn a relationship, miss out on opportunities because they're just not prepared. So, how can they kind of close that gap?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, for me, it's about doing the research ahead of time, really. Again, we break down like how to do this in the book, but essentially you have to understand what funds theses are, what their thesis criteria and their investment criteria encompass. So are they investing in your stage? Are they writing the check size that you need? Are they investing in your sector? Are they investing, in your corporate structure? Are they actually going to be helpful to you? Doing all this kind of research, it takes a lot of work, right? But it's one of those, like, you can go and throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. You can have that approach for sure. But if you don't come from like this very in-networked situation, I think it pays to be more prepared, right? So do your research, figure out who the right investors would be for your cap table, create a list, and then prioritize them based on like, here's the one that like, oh my God, my dreams would come true if Lolita at Ghana's Ventures was my investor, right? Joking, but not joking. But then we flip the list and we start practicing with the one at the bottom, so you can start figuring out what
Oh,
are
I
what are
love
these
that.
conversations like. And that's a sales tactic. Again, that's kind of my background, right? I mean, not kind of, it is. Thinking about what's the best way to educate yourself, get those cycles in, because so much of this is how many cycles you do, right? It is a numbers game to a certain extent. And so being able to practice and then not feeling like so anxious and frustrated because you're like, well, these are my practice conversations. If they like work out or not, at least I learned something. So when I do get to those other ones, I've already learned enough. And by that time, you might think, oh, you know what? Actually, these are not the right investors. And here's why, right? You might be like, oh, actually, they don't invest in my area, or from a regional or sector perspective. And so getting to that no quickly, even if you're telling yourself, oh, they were on my list, but that's a no. Like, now you avoided wasting an email, like the time to script an email or take a call or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's really important, doing that homework. But the one thing I'll tell you, and we cover this is one of the frameworks, is there's a ton of frameworks in the book. One of the frameworks we talk about is the zombie fund detection script.
Oh,
Do you
that's
have any
good.
idea
Wait,
what that is?
I got an idea. I was going to, hey, I want to guess because
Guess.
I've talked to a lot of investors who are investors by title and they have it on LinkedIn, but they haven't wrote a check in a year and a half, something crazy like that. They go to the events and they posture really good on LinkedIn and maybe even X on Twitter, but they
Yeah.
wrote one check in the past like year and a half, 16, 18 months, and they still are asking, hey, founders, come and pitch us, but they have no
Yeah.
intention of writing a check.
That's right, Chris, and that is true, and a couple of reasons, right? I don't think that VCs are doing that are necessarily evil or anything,
Yeah.
but you have to watch out because they might be raising that next fund. So this zombie fund detection script that we pull together and kind of help you think about how it's sure, like that proximity, like you said, go meet them in person, etc. If you have a list and then you have that proximity to them and you can build a relationship, great. But what if they're a zombie fund or investor who's not actually actively writing, even though they say they are? So it's, to your point, Chris, it's really important to say, when was your last check? Are you actively deploying? What is your timeline? Asking these kinds of questions to qualify the investors, kind of like when you're doing a sale, right? When you're doing a sale, you want to know who's the person who holds the project, right? Who's the owner of the project? Who's writing the check? What's their timeline? What's the process? And if you are able to qualify the investor, are they a zombie or are they alive? And that in
Yes.
itself, you might have a list, right? The list that we said previously on, like, that tactical, like, here's how you would do it, flip it around and prioritize. Well, now you also have to do the sleuthing, because even though you might have the best list and it's the right target list, are they a zombie fund or not? So another thing to consider, and then we talk about in the book.
Timing is such a big deal in this game because if you're catching them after they just deployed a ton of capital, they might love you, but literally not have the capital left to invest in your company.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
timing is such a unpredictable, kind of untamable thing in the venture world, but I've learned that it is one of the things that nobody can control, but it's still a big part of fundraising. It's just timing, and it's out of your control as a founder, especially. So let me ask you this: when it comes to this specific that interview system of like
yeah.
because I think that's good having founders actually interview the investors too.
That's
When do you
right. Yeah,
suggest
do your
founders
due
do that?
diligence. So great question, right? So again, my process and my recommendations are always do your homework and then verify, right? It's kind of like when you're using LLMs. You can't just like assume it's all correct. There's going to be some mistakes. So comb through it and pick up on different information. So for example, if founders they may ask the questions directly if you get a meeting, um, or they might see it online. Like they could literally see who has this fund invested in any companies within whatever time frame. Those typically are pretty public. So there's different creative ways, again, art and science. But the other thing you can do is, if you see their portfolio and or you're able to get an introduction to one of the founders in their portfolio, you can
Oh,
also ask them, right? Like, that's the best insight, because it's like, what do people say about you when you're not in the room? And the founders within portfolios, and some of them, to be honest, right, depending on the check size, they may or may not be in day-to-day communication with their investors. But they're great at insight, right? And typically funds will share like where are we and what are we doing. And maybe I shouldn't say typically. I try to do that with our portfolio. It's hit or miss. But try to get the insight. You have to be creative. Like, how can you get this insight, right? Maybe you're at a conference and they're doing a panel or a fireside chat and they say, hey, does anyone have questions? Or even on a webinar, you raise your hand and you say, hey, so are you actually deploying right now? What does your process look like? So it just, you have to go with the flow. There isn't like, here's how you do it, 1 2 3. It's like, what opportunities do you have? How do you grasp it? And how do you waste less of your time so you get to that no the fastest? So when you do get a yes, it just feels that much better.
Oh man, this was a really good conversation. I'm excited for this book. Where can founders go and join your wait list and all of that good stuff? Matter of fact, I can link that in the show notes because I got to give me a copy myself, because this sounds like it'll be one of the better starter books.
Oh, I love that. Well, I'm happy to send you an ARC if you'd like. But yeah, so lolitataub.co/book. That's where all the information is on the book. And in fact, we're going to be putting in an Airtable that has a quote from the community of hard learned lessons, because again, community is the most important part, and we've got to learn from each other. And so so lolitataub.co/book. It will be selling on Amazon, ebook, hard copy, paperback, and I am looking at maybe doing the Audible version too. It's just that it's so much more work, Chris. You would probably appreciate that because you do a podcast, but like the voice and all of that. But I am trying 11 Labs. So we'll see. Maybe it's a combination. Maybe I don't use it at all. I don't know. But all of the formats are going to be out there, and for sure we'll be sharing more. And and also, if anyone in your ecosystem wants to try or startup investor matching tool like Ghana's, it connects founders and investors from around the world based on the thesis and the startup. And this isn't like a database. This is a double opt-in intro. So when you get a match, it's an actual connection, and it's totally free. And it's at ganas.vc/match. And what else can I give to your audience? We have a bunch of resources on ganas.vc too, if we're not a fit. But the Startup Investor Matching Tool actually was born out of trying to share the wealth from a deal flow perspective with investors, but also saying to founders, hey, like we may not be a good fit for you, or vice versa, but here's an opportunity to potentially meet other investors.
I love that. Lolita, thank you so much for being here, being such an amazing guest.
Oh, thank you, Chris. It was really fun. And I hope you enjoy the book. And reviews at the beginning are really important. And also buying. It's been a learning journey. Like so it's like the book thing. Like apparently, like if you get so many sales, like at the beginning, it signals the algorithm of retailers, Amazon included, that this is a book to get in front of people. So I definitely want to say, like, if you do get it, please write a review, whatever you have to say about it. And please do support the book so that more first-time founders, angels, GPs, LPs, and ecosystem builders can have that map that honestly I wish I had when I first started.
For sure I will. And I definitely will encourage my audience to do so as well.
Thank you, Chris.